Hey folks, just a heads up for upcoming live events as part of the Spooky Spectacular. We'll be doing a live stream and live recording event at Arcane in Durham, North Carolina on September 29th. Charlie will be at the Abbeville Upstate Spirit Conference in Abbeville, South Carolina. I'll be at Splatterflix in Durham at the Carolina Theater. And beyond spooky season, we'll both be at Retcon in Cary in February of 2023. There are links to all of those and more information in the show notes to this episode. Thanks a lot.
You are listening to Arcane Carolinas, an exploration of the Carolinas' folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird. Each episode, we examine the historical context of our topic and aim to preserve some of the stories that help make this part of the world such a fascinating place. All right. So welcome to Arcane Carolinas, live at ConCarolinas. I'm your co-host, Charlie Mushaw.
I'm your co-host, multi-award-winning novelist Michael G. Williams, coming to you live from Durham, North Carolina.
Doing the Futurama head in a jar.
Yes. Yes, I'm very interested in your story, Philip J. Fry.
So just to give you all a little bit of insight into the mental gymnastics that went into today's topic, we were originally going to do UFOs because after ConCarolinas, we sat. It was the same weekend that the Navy authorized. Yeah. It was the same weekend that got released to the public, and it was all over the news, except me and Michael. The TV in the lobby bar was just like nonstop cycling the Tic Tac news. And I was just like, I went off the rails, just like that's all I could talk about was UFOs for the rest of the night.
You should sit a little closer to the mic, by the way, or move it. There you go.
All right. Because they can hear me fine. I don't want to be on this super loud one.
Yeah. Okay. No problem. Yeah. Now you sound great.
There we go. That's better. So anyway, you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we were going to do UFOs and it was going to be super awesome. And then we found out that Carolina Haints, who's another podcast that we really like, they're doing UFOs.
Yeah.
Right. And we were like, well, we didn't tell anybody we were going to do UFOs. So let's not step on them and just let them do it. Right. Because they do good work and like, whatever, they can do UFOs. So then what we were going to do was we were just going to get really weird. I'm looking at you. I don't know if you can tell that I'm looking at you.
I could feel it.
I'm like, man, he's just not feeling me today. So we were going to do a deep dive into like the very fabric of reality and like what is real and like get really super philosophical. But then we decided that wouldn't really work like this because there are visual cues in conversation. I don't want to like spill my guts about my beliefs of the nature of existence to a computer screen.
Yeah, I was a little concerned that if I started explaining my theory of why magic is real and how it operates as a universal force, and I was this far away, everybody was going to just like want to step even further back from me.
So instead, we're doing something that is a absolute favorite topic of mine. And hey, come on in. Absolute favorite topic of mine. And that is Satanic Panic in the Carolinas.
Yes. I'm throwing the goat.
Because having been I don't know if victim is the right word, but subjected to it as I'm just like, oh man. So I definitely remember my mom seeing the 60 Minutes and the Oprahs, the whatever about like, the devil's coming to get your kids and here's why. And then like everybody in our life, like all the other parents were like, I heard this is evil. I heard that's evil. And then next thing you know, all the cool stuff you like, you're being told like, listen, I know that was okay last week to watch that, but this week we're not watching that anymore. I feel like that is sort of a universal experience for kids. So there's all these different Satanic Panic incidents or waves through the history of North Carolina, going all the way back to Michael, the 1700s. Michael recently talked about a witch hunt, which ties into it because the like, this woman is communing with the devil and putting a curse on our community. It turns out that wasn't the case.
Not at all.
So he did that one. So I do want to do contemporary stuff, And we're going to get to that. But first, today's story is from the 1800s.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. So Michael doesn't know anything about this. And it's based out of Charleston, South Carolina. I've never been there personally. Michael, you've never been there either?
I have never been there.
So the local businesses I want to plug are based strictly on Google Maps and things that looked kind of cool.
Thank goodness for the internet.
Yeah. So in Folly Beach, which is right next to Charleston, there's a coffee shop with a dog wall of fame called the Lost Dog Cafe. And I was like, I get coffee there.
Now I really want to go there.
There's the Old Exchange and Provost Dungeon, which is like a historical building, historical jail, basically. And they do costume tours and stuff like that of this historic building. It was formerly a Revolutionary War prison. And then later, City Hall. The reviews on Google Maps say good for kids. So
prison, good for kids. I agree.
We know your stance on children.
Yes. Mainly I stand on children.
Right. And the last thing I wanted to plug is it's not really a business. It's more of a thing to see. And that's Rainbow Row, which is not Rainbow Road, like in Mario Kart, but like row as in like a row of homes.
Thank you for reading my mind.
Yeah. So it's a historic district cluster of houses. It's 13 different Georgian style row houses, which that doesn't mean anything to me. I don't know what Georgian style is.
Ooh.
But they were built between 1748 and 1845, and they're all still standing, and they're all painted a different color. So that's why it's called Rainbow Row. It sounds neat. Sounds like a thing to see.
So Gail Martin, who's there this weekend selling books, has a series. She and her husband, Larry, write a series of paranormal mysteries set in Charleston. And she has talked about those houses before when she was doing stuff online about like talking about the settings of those stories.
All right. Well, there you go. People know about Georgian style row houses. So the legend. This is how the magic happens. I do have notes every time. It's not all improv. Thomas Vaughan. Michael, are you familiar with Thomas Vaughan?
No, not at all.
He was born on April 17th, 1621. He was a Welsh clergyman, philosopher, and alchemist.
Ooh, I like him already.
Yeah, he seems pretty cool. He was also a bit of a mess. So he got kicked out of medical school. He was a royalist, which was not popular.
Oh, yeah.
The fun part is he was a drunk.
These things might all be related to each other.
Right. This is where he gets really awesome. So he took his accumulated knowledge that he did get from medical school and went out and he married a woman named Rebecca Vaughan. They worked together and he established himself as a pillar of the philosopher community, which apparently was a thing. There was a society, if you will, of alchemists and philosophers in what we now call the UK at this time. And
what was it called?
It was just a scene. It wasn't.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
And him and his wife established their authority by basically starting a flame war, like an internet style flame war with pamphlets. So they would print out pamphlets about why other people were wrong about how to turn crap into gold and their philosophies, and that they were the source of all knowledge.
So it's kind of like the real alchemists of 17th century England, like as though they were the real housewives. Like it's all drama and just like being angry at each other.
Exactly. So I think that's really funny that him and his wife did that.
Love it.
She did die pretty young. Thomas did continue his lifelong trend of mucking things up within the philosophical and alchemical communities. Particularly spicy is the rumor that he had secretly pledged himself to the devil by beheading someone.
Oh, I like that touch. That's tasty.
Right. So Satan came to him. This is the legend. This is a real dude. Like, if you know our format, we do the legend and then we do the real stories. This is a real dude. Like this dude verifiably exists.
He is a historical figure.
Yes. The legend is that Satan showed up and was like, hey, I'll give you 33 extra years if you bring me ahead. And he threw in a demon bride. That was the add-on bonus.
So this is like 17th century Jack Parsons, basically.
Yes. And the third thing was he would actually teach him alchemy and allow him to make gold.
Like real deal alchemy.
Like real deal alchemy. So he cuts somebody's head off and flees to America.
I shouldn't laugh. I mean, that's probably awful. Probably. I like how I'm like, it's probably awful to behead someone, but like, I mean, if that really happened in terms of the beheading, then I shouldn't laugh, except it was a long time ago and it's safe to laugh at.
I need you to bring me a head. What are you going to do for me? Gold. Not enough. 33 years. Need a sweetener. Human bride.
And passage to to the colonies.
So he flees to America. He marries the demonic bride that he had been promised. They have children, and he proceeds to taint the Vaughn family bloodline for generations to come. So March 1st, 1864, future Satanist Diana Vaughn is born in Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh.
She's raised in a Luciferian household, as was the Vaughn family tradition, by her father and uncle. She's brought up in the ways of Satanism.
Is this the legend still, or is this the history?
We're in the legend.
Okay.
In April of 1885, Diana is summoned to Charleston, South Carolina, and told that there is a temple there known as the Sanctum Regnum, and each Friday at 3:00, Satan himself gives instructions to the 11 leaders of a secret Masonic sect known as the Palladians.
I'm just going to be scribbling notes furiously for a future book while you keep talking.
The positions of these members were the Pontiff of Supreme Dogmatic Directorate.
Supreme Dogmatic Directorate is like the best job title. Oh my God. I cannot log into LinkedIn fast enough. Okay.
That's just the one guy. And then there's the 10 emeriti, members for life of the Great Serenissime College.
Spell the emeriti part.
It's like you see when people win awards at college. Emeriti. Maritime. Oh, I am literate, folks. I wrote all these myself.
It's okay. I have reader vocabulary too. You know, that's the thing where like you grow up in a place where you read a lot of books and you don't hear a lot of the people around you use the words that you read in the books. And so you grow up. Until I was like 17, I thought it was laboratory because I'd only ever heard it said on Doctor Who. So, you know.
Well, it's one of those things where like I wasn't sensitive about it until we started this podcast a couple of years ago, and then we started getting emails and like Charlie's a dumbass and doesn't know how to read.
I got a message from a fellow writer a few weeks ago saying, I love the way that you mispronounced the name of some place. And I wrote back to him and said, well, if you're not going to tell me how to pronounce it correctly, then I'm just going to assume that everybody in that place is A, stupid, and B, wrong. So
Diana Vaughn, aspiring Satanist, is sent by her family to Charleston to go to the temple and I guess study, be a part of it, like join this sect. And upon arrival at the lodge, Diana was chosen to enter the sanctum. And there was a very large statue of, now, so here's another one, right? Is it Baphomet or is it Baphomet?
It's Baphomet, is my understanding. But I got that understanding from Final Fantasy VII, so don't ask me.
So there is a large Baphomet statue in the center of the temple. And it was in this sanctum that, according to Diana's own diary, she stated that she had the first of many meetings with the devil. Many meetings.
Many meetings.
I'll go ahead and check my Outlook. My calendar's up to date. Have my assistant get you a time slot. You walk into this temple, right? And I just imagine all right, what's up? And smoke and big, kind of like on The Simpsons where Ned Flanders pops up out of the pentagram. He's just like, what? And then Homer's like, I don't want it. He's like, ugh, and then goes away and then what? Does it over and over again. She eventually fled the Church of Satan, or whatever the sect was called, the Palladianisms.
Right. The Palladians.
And she writes a publication, Memoirs of an Ex-Palladiste.
Ooh.
And in that, she writes that her first encounter, she was fasting and meditating alone in front of the statue as fire leapt out into the room from the statue, flowing up the walls and surrounding her with flames. The fire was followed by 7 claps of thunder in quick succession. 5 unknown spirits then appeared and vanished as quickly as they'd appeared. It's very Night on Bald Mountain Fantasia vibes.
Yeah. It's very theatrical,
Yeah, I'm a ghost. I'm gone.
I'm going to say I'm no stranger to a room with a big pinnacle on the floor, and I have never seen anything that exciting.
But then Lucifer himself appeared and was like, hey, girl. That was not part of her memoirs. I added that. But what she did write, and this is a quote attributed to her. It is from the publication, which exists, Memoirs from an Ex-Paladista. His male beauty on this unforgettable day is unspeakable. And I just imagine him being like, oh, stop it. Oh,
I really want like little blushing devil to be like, oh gosh, oh, you say such kind things.
So she rose to the ranks. She hung out at the temple for a while, became a high priestess of the Palladian order, served as a liaison to Satan for the lower ranking members of the group, would transcribe his will and word for all of the dark congregation.
Yeah. Okay.
She was the chosen one.
Right.
She had the secret sauce.
She had figured out how to make money at this.
So after some time serving in this role, Diana Vaughn decided that she was being duped by the great deceiver and that she was being used to damage mankind and that she needed to return to God.
Okay.
She flees Charleston, sails to France, and takes refuge as a nun, where she cloisters among the Catholic faithful, knowing that they would protect her from would-be satanic assassins. And it is during this period that she began her expose work, publishing her story, and it was incredibly popular. This is real. Like, this happened.
So she actually published a book of this stuff.
When the initial publication was covered in her hometown paper, an acquaintance came forward, corroborates the story. She claimed that there were 500,000 Palladians in America, which is selling it a little too hard on that. Her publications were sold throughout France. We'll get into that in a minute when we get to the deconstructing part. Catholic periodicals had thrown their complete support behind Diana's tale of redemption, because it was a bride of Satan who, through the grace of God, found salvation in the Catholic Church. And she gained enough true believers to make lines around the world.
So she really figured out how to make money at this.
People bought in that there was a Masonic cult in Charleston that had regular meetings with Lucifer every Friday at 3.
It's like, what is it? Banker's hours? Come on.
Cucumber sandwiches were served.
Right.
Very fancy and formal affair. It was like a garden party. Everybody dressed up.
I have high tea with the Great Deceiver every Friday, and I'm really surprised they call him the Great Deceiver, but I think he might be up to something.
Right. So 2 years have passed since Diana has fled America to France. Her pamphlets and books sold literally hundreds of thousands of copies around the world, gained favor among the Catholic Church's top officials. They dubbed the Charleston area as the Infernal Vatican. I love that. Like, I feel like Charleston should have a sign somewhere like, oh, the Infernal Vatican.
That is the best. Oh, I'm so envious of that. Oh, okay.
Diana's story culminates on April 19th of 1897. An eager crowd gathered in the Grand Hall of the Geographical Society of Paris to meet the woman who belonged to Charleston's premier satanic organization after she agrees to begin giving public speeches in addition to her pamphlets.
Mm-hmm.
They instead were met by a guy named Marie Joseph Gabriel Antoine Hoagland Pahés, who wrote under the pen name Leo Taxel.
It's a lot shorter. It's easier to fit on the spine of a book.
Exactly. So Leo explains with pride that Diana was completely a fabrication of his imagination.
That's amazing.
Yes. So the reality is Leo Taxel made up this person, right? But I've still got 3 pages of notes. So let's deconstruct what actually happened. So Taxel was raised in a religious family. I'm going to call him Taxel instead of Joseph Gabriel Antoine Hoagland Pahés, a very long surname.
Sure. We're talking about the story he wrote under this pen name. It's appropriate to refer to him by the pen name.
Right. He's raised in a religious family. He doesn't particularly like that, but he kind of goes with the flow, even though he doesn't really like it. But he gets disowned by his father when he joins the Freemasons. And then the Freemasons kick him out of his lodge. So he's just like double burnt. Like, nobody likes this guy. He is just rejected everywhere he goes. So he hatches a plan. He's like, I'm going to get back at everyone. They'll see. And then he did it. He starts publishing really sensational and fabricated exposés on alleged satanic practices by the Freemasons. And he chose Charleston as ground zero because it was far away from his home in France. All right, Charleston, South Carolina. That's where it goes.
Also, Charleston at the time was a really international trading city. Like it was sort of the New York of colonial America. It was like the center of culture and the center of commerce. And so like it's a place everybody in Europe would have heard of.
That is a much less fun tagline for a sign than Infernal Vatican.
It really is.
Charleston, the New York of the South, a long time ago.
I do prefer Infernal Vatican.
So he's got an axe to grind. He decides that he's basically going to play both the Masons and the church. And the hurdle that he needed to overcome was that he already had a reputation for writing and publishing incendiary pamphlets and articles that basically just made fun of the church. He'd actually been accused of libel regarding a book he wrote. He wrote a book called The Secret Loves of Pope Pius IX on April 20th, 1884.
I love him. I love him so much. I aspire as a writer to wind up being sued for libel by both the Freemasons and the Catholic Church.
So then Pope Leo XIII condemns Freemasonry, and that's when the light bulb hit. And Taxel was like, I can get them both.
Yeah.
And make everybody feel my wrath. So he's like, I got to get in good with the church for this to work. So he starts working to gain their trust. And that's when he switched over to writing about the Freemasons instead of the church. So he was just writing anti-Pope stuff until the popes were like, and we don't like the Freemasons. And he was like, yeah, me neither. So let's get you both. And he wanted to reveal their bias and that they'd buy into anything if it suited their agenda. So that was his whole goal. So to build a believable psyop, he spent weeks and weeks and weeks reviewing reports of missing people in newspapers. And then he picked a story of somebody that was like not going to come back. Like he would watch and see if the missing people came back. And he found one where he was like, okay, well, this person's really, really gone, right? They're not coming back.
Yeah.
And he went to a priest, turned on the waterworks, and gave a tearful confession where he admitted murdering the person. Yeah. And then he was willing to give himself over for salvation. And over the course of 2 years, this became like a big deal conversion case that the Catholic Church propped up. Like, here was this person that hated us, and now he has seen the light. He's our boy. So I don't know whether or not to believe this because of his nature, but Taxel did claim that he was granted a 45-minute audience with the Pope at one point.
I'm going to be a little skeptical about that. I don't know. They might have let him inside the Vatican for 45 minutes, like the gate at the edge of town. Right. But I don't know about 45 minutes with the Pope.
Like, I don't know what he would talk to the Pope about for 45 minutes. Hey, remember all that stuff I said? Hey, I should get back. Sorry about that.
What's it like knowing absolutely nothing about normal life?
So Diana Vaughn, right? Like, who is Diana Vaughn? You know, if Leo made her up, who is this person? Because he had hired a woman from a U.S. typewriter company to transcribe his words and carry on all the correspondence. So he had a plant. She sat for illustrations to run alongside her memoirs. She sat for photographs. She met with clergy members when they were investigating her stories. And she got 150 francs a month.
Oh, that's genius. Oh, I love these people.
It's like the Craigslist. Like, I actually heard this on the radio the other day. Somebody was doing, which they probably got the idea from Ozark. This actually happened. Somebody on Craigslist recently posted that they needed to hire a fake therapist for a therapy session with their significant other. But I feel like, like, need faux Satanist turned nun, 150 francs a month.
Must be able to present what I write as though it is the agenda of the Dark Lord.
I made a joke that he just like picked Charleston out of thin air, but one of the reasons that he did pick Charleston was because it was a hotbed for Freemasonry, the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry.
Yeah.
And he knew that it would make it more believable that their like North American seat of power could be the Infernal Vatican.
Totally. I mean, again, it's like that New York thing. When you're writing a story or when you're just like making something up, I guess, you can say anything happened in New York and people will believe you,
So, but, the Catholic Church is a business and they have representatives everywhere. So the Vatican reached out to the local bishop and was like, what's up with this? And he was like, it's all crap. Don't worry about it. This is not true. So guess what happened? Diana Vaughn published a memoir that said that he was a Satanist too, and he was covering.
Oh, I love it.
And they bought it. They're like, oh, checks out.
In the absence of things like literacy, then, how does one fact check anything?
So It's worth noting, and I got a copy of this book because it's $5 print on demand on Amazon. There's a guy named Arthur Edward Waite. He's an author, and he actually figured out that this was all crap. Like, he read between the lines and was just like, this isn't real. And he called it out. He wrote a book titled Devil Worship in France. And he kind of on the nose. I read it on a plane recently, and I got some looks from the person next to me. But first, he walks through all of Leo Taxil's claims, and then he walks through all of Diana's claims, and then deconstructs them all. So like the whole first half of his book is just like, here's what these people are saying. And the second half of his book is, and this is why they're lying. So it's interesting. It's kind of hard to read now. Like, it's, you know, it was written a long time ago.
Sure.
But it is interesting. Taxil created a lie so attractive to those that were hungry for something to like explain their lot in life that it outlived him. It outlived him admitting that it was a hoax.
Yeah.
We'll get into what I mean by that in a second. So he confesses he's super excited that he's tricked everybody. And then there's a quote from him in 1906 that people were fascinated by how far he got. So in 1906, he gave a quote to a newspaper and said, "It dawned on me there was a lot of money in being a Munchausen of the right kind. And for 12 years, I gave it to them hot and strong, but never too hot. When indicting,
Sorry, go ahead.
when indicting such slush as the story of the devil snake who wrote prophecies on Diana's back with the end of his tail, I would sometimes ask myself, hold on, you're going too far. But it turns out I did not."
That is incredibly evocative, and I love it.
So he died in 1907. And here's the thing. You may have noticed the fake chick tracts that I sprinkled all around. Real chick tracts still quote Diana Vaughn. They actually still quote it. He owned that it was a fabrication. But the Curse of Baphomet is a chick tract that quotes it. And I cannot wait to get into that when we continue our Satanic Panic series later in the fall and we do some of the more modern stuff. Because the fact that this hoax just got perpetuated and perpetuated and perpetuated by people that they were like, I need this to be real to justify what I want to do.
Yeah.
They bought it, even though they knew it was fake. And so my closing section, which is a whole other page, I do think it's important. Michael and I have talked about this before, that we're all susceptible for falling for conspiracy theories if they align with our beliefs, right? That's the way they work. Some folks are more susceptible thanks to something called jumping to conclusion bias, which is exactly what it sounds like. But it's a bias that indicates a tendency to make up one's mind quickly about things, often with little evidence. This has been studied by psychologists, and it's found that people with this bias are more likely to endorse conspiracy theories than people without it. And another thing to keep in mind is that sometimes folks, we all do this. We tend to see patterns where they're not there if it cements our position on a topic. I mean, there was a famous coin flipping experiment performed to illustrate this, where participants were shown 10 sequences of 10 coins. And after each sequence, they were asked whether they thought the results were random or predetermined on a 7-point scale. And it basically confirmed that, they wanted to see patterns. And this particular exercise was used in a 2018 study to measure what is now called illusory pattern perception, which is, again, what it sounds like, the tendency to see patterns where there are none. I mean, and we're all susceptible to this, right? Still, the chick tract thing is beyond. Anyway, so what researchers found is that respondents who believed that there was some kind of predetermined plan were also more likely to believe conspiracy theories. They tried a few other methods of measuring illusory pattern perceptions, such as having participants try to detect patterns, abstract modern art paintings with similar results, where people all stuff that was there. It's not. But, one that I really like, and this is my favorite example of it, is there was a study that found that this trait is associated with people who will ascribe profundity or like the weight to randomly generated nonsense statements. So like every teenager in a terrible band writing just like the worst lyrics, like, this is so deep, man. And I have been there, so I get for it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, I will own my like bad prose from being an angry young man. Sad young man is more like it. But so I get that we're all susceptible to that, right? Like, we're all susceptible to that. But like, come on. When somebody is like, no, I made all that up, you kind of got to take it at its value. So anyway, that was number 1 on our new series on Satanic Panic incidents.
Thank you very much for all of that research. That's amazing. So I have so many thoughts about it. One, Like, and we talked about this a little last year at Congregate when we talked about the UFOs over Chimney Rock and the ways that that was presented by a lot of people as a spiritual event, you know, sort of an angelic visitation. And the fact that it was happening during the Second Great Awakening, you know, this sort of like big surge of evangelical belief and like revival meetings and stuff like that in early United States in the early part of the 19th century. So then like everything that you've described here, the story, you know, the book coming out in the 1880s and the presentation of the idea that in the later 19th century, there was this satanic cabal operating in Charleston and et cetera. That all lines up very well with a repetition of that same pattern, the Third Great Awakening, when there was a huge religious revival movement in the United States for the last half of the 19th century. And if you study like the cultural forces at work and also just things like the economic swings of the time, the ways that the economy like ebbed and flowed at different points during these sorts of cycles of belief in this kind of stuff and like panic about these kinds of things, then it's easy to see the ways that there's sort of a through line from the early 19th century and even the early 18th century, frankly, all the way through to the 1980s and the 1990s. And today, like, I'm not going to launch into it, but there are direct cultural and, I don't know, belief related threads that you can draw to connect things like somebody saying, I'm going to write a book that says that there are a bunch of satanic Freemasons in Charleston and everybody's going to believe it. And then being right, to like QAnon today and Pizzagate and the JFK assassination and all kinds of things like that. Like there are really strong cultural threads that connect all of those things to the point almost that you can kind of say like, okay, when the economy does this thing and politics is like this and, you know, cultural forces are, you know, in this way, then that sort of thing is going to pop up. And it's so fascinating that somebody said, oh, I know a way to really take advantage of this. I'm going to stick it to the church and I'm going to stick it to those Freemasons. I'm going to make them so mad at each other and at me that they all go buy my book. That's so smart.
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to like, you know, when things are good, right? When things are going good, you don't need the distraction of a bad guy. But when things aren't going so good, it's really handy to have a bad guy to look at and be like, okay, well, that's the real enemy.
Yeah. Also, this particular time period, sorry, I promise I will not talk for the next 22 minutes about this. But for this particular time period is sort of when we start to see like really accelerating technological change, and periods of really accelerating technological change are also tied into this sort of moment. And so like the faster that the world changes more, then the more uncertain people feel and the more they start looking for some sort of third factor that they can latch onto as the explanation for what's really going on. That's just incredible to me. I mean, like just the thought that Taxel put into it of saying like, I'm going to set the date of this fictional person's birth at the conclusion basically of the Civil War, you know, and like tie it into all these different ideas. And also at the time, there was a lot of sort of like fading fealty to France in the United States because of the Revolutionary War and the really strong associations there that where France was like our greatest ally and things like that. But, you know, times had changed and France had been through plenty of their own political issues. And so like just the way that he's able to tie in so many different things. It's also fascinating to me because it makes me think of the conspiracy theories and beliefs around things like René Le Chateau in France and the Priory of Sion in France and things like that, where there are these conspiracy theories where there are plenty of people who believe that they're real. And today, plenty of people willing to say, no, I made that all up. I made it up as a gag and some people believed it. And now I don't know how to unmake this up. And that kind of stuff still gets passed around and still gets believed. And you can still go buy books about it.
I do want to note something. Thomas Vaughan did not actually cut anybody's head off.
That's probably for the best.
He's a real guy. Like Thomas Vaughan definitely existed, and he definitely did flame wars with other like and philosophers. And he was an interesting dude. He also didn't move to the United States. Like it's pretty verifiable that he died in England. Oh. So that was all Leo Taxel just making that up and being like, well, I got to tie this person to somebody else somehow to create this lineage. I'll use this alchemist.
I'm curious to know, I'm not asking you to tell me right now. I'm just like, I'm going to go read about this person later. I'm curious to know more about his wife dying young. only because there's a possibility there that she died as a result of being exposed to something poisonous or toxic in the course of their alchemical studies, which would indicate that she was the real scientist, which is one of those things that history doesn't tend to talk about. It's one of the things that's most fascinating to me about the story that Taxel told, because what he presented was a story of a secret society in which a woman rose to the highest position, which was very uncommon at the time. And like, there's a lot of misogyny in that sort of like ceremonial magic space today. And there was even more then. And it's so fascinating to me that he like recognized, oh, if it'll be like that much more sensational to tell that story. But it also like makes me want to go read about the real Vaughn's real life, because what if she was the real scientist and he was just the guy writing hate mail?
The drunk royalist.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it, man. That's what I had. This is so weird. Thank you for doing the talking head thing, though.
I am perfectly happy to do so. I am very much looking forward to modern Satanic Panic stuff, because I grew up in Asheville and Asheville Mall. Do you mind if I jump into like a brief modern Satanic Panic thing?
No, go for it.
So the Asheville Mall, which I mean, I haven't been to in like 30 years, but when I was a kid, it was like the place that you could go anywhere within an hour and a half and eat your mall food court food. You know, you could get your you get your Baskin Robbins, you could get a cookie that was bigger than your face, etc. You know, and it had like multiple department stores and things like that. It had 2 bookstores that made it heaven, and constant rumors when I was a child. I was born in the 70s. I like came of age in the late 80s, and there were constant rumors when I was a teenager in the 80s about the Asheville Mall, which was owned at the time by a family that owned this business that had like bought the land and built the mall. The rumor was that they were Satanists, and that if you took your children there, that children got like kidnapped from the Asheville Mall all the time. Which, of course, that's not true. If children disappeared off of the main concourse at any mall, anywhere, all the time, that mall wouldn't stay open for very long. Like, that's a completely ridiculous thing. It's like obvious that that can't be true. But we were also convinced that it was true. And so we would hear stories of, you know, oh, they're so rich that they cover it up. They pay off the police. They pay off Channel 13. You know, they pay off all the ways that people could find out to keep it out of the newspaper. And the idea was that this family was themselves a sort of satanic cabal. And they were running a satanic coven, and they were using the mall as sort of a harvester of children to use in their sacrifices or whatever. And you know, it named the fantastical story. And there was somebody in the little place where I grew up 30 minutes outside of Asheville who had heard that and would willingly repeat it as fact. And it's just wild to me that like those sorts of stories are the things that keep circulating and keep getting recycled. You know, and it runs all the way back to like anti-Semitic conspiracy theories in medieval Europe, you know, and like weird stuff where like these ideas just like keep getting rehashed into new contexts. It's fascinating to me, but every time I think Satanic Panic, I immediately think Asheville Mall. And then I think B. Dalton Books. And I don't know where B. Dalton Books is these days. I don't know if they still exist, but if they do, they're probably not operating as a front for a satanic cabal. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe that's how they stayed open. Maybe Satan said, bring me a head and I'll let you remain a brick and mortar bookstore.
Paperbacks only. Cheaper to make.
Yeah, true.
Anyway, that's it. We'll be, thank you. We'll be doing another one here. I'm taking an hour break to eat something, and then roll one in. What room is it in, Michael?
Olmsted. Olmsted
is over by Author's Alley, and we'll be doing that with the Strange Animals podcast. And I'm going to talk about a giant bug. It's going to be
pretty great.
Thank you so much, folks. There's little goodie bags. Please take them. There's stickers and buttons and koozies and postcards and trading cards in there. We brought them to give them away. Please do take them.
Please take them so that Charlie doesn't have to tote them back home.
Right. You've been listening to Arcane Carolinas. Thanks for joining us. If you liked it, give us a rating, leave a comment. If you didn't like it, send us an email and tell us why. If you're not wrong, we'll try to fix it.
And if you're interested in award-winning speculative fiction, including science fiction, urban fantasy, and horror, find me, Michael G. Williams, at www.michaelgwilliamsbooks.com and check out Falstaff Books at falstaffbooks.com.
If you'd like to pick up some Arcane Carolinas merch, look at behind-the-scenes info, pictures, videos, stuff like that, all the things that get cut. Check out arcanecarolinas.com, where you can get access to our Patreon, our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, all that in one place, including the merch store. Buy a shirt.
Clothe your body.
Drape your body in our wares.
Be our living billboards.
So why then? Wrong button.